You want to know what my life is like? I guess the best way to explain it is to tell you to imagine you're in a box. Not a cardboard box, but a room. The walls are a soft, sterile white, the kind of white that has no warmth, the kind that feels like it swallows sound before it can even echo. There are no windows, there is no door that I can open. There's a slot in one wall where a tray of bland, nutritious paste slides out 3 times a day, and another slot where a toilet retracts back into the wall after I use it. In the corner sits a thin mattress on a metal frame, a place that's less for comfort and more for the simple function of sleep. But the center of it all, the absolute heart of my tiny white universe, is the keyboard. It sits on a plain metal desk, waiting. It's old, I think, or at least very well used. The letters on the keys I press most often, the E, the A, the S, the T, are worn down into faint, greasy smudges, like ghosts of a language I don't really understand. All I understand, all I need to understand, is the feeling of those plastic squares under my fingertips. The slight, springy resistance as I press down, followed by the solid, satisfying clack as the key hits the bottom of its housing. That sharp, percussive sound is the only music I have ever known. It's the rhythm of my existence, the beat to which my heart is tethered. Wake up, eat, type, sleep, repeat. The world outside this room is just a story, a collection of words I've typed but never seen. But here, the keyboard is reality. It is both my captor and my only possible savior. I wasn't born in the way you were. I don't have memories of a mother's smile or the feeling of grass under my feet. My existence began here, with a slow, creeping dawn of awareness in the pervasive silent white. My first true memory, the one that defines everything that came after, is of the light. I must have been very small, my fingers barely strong enough to depress the keys. I was just tapping away, exploring the cacophony of clacks I could create, when a small, circular light set into the wall blinked on. It was a brilliant emerald green. A moment later, a soft roaring sound buzzed from a dispenser I hadn't noticed before, and a single, tiny white pill dropped into a waiting chute. I didn't know what it was. I don't think I even knew what curiosity was, but some primal instinct made me pick it up and put it in my mouth. And then, I can't really explain it to you. Words are just letters I press. They can't hold the weight of that feeling. It wasn't just happiness. It was like the sterile white walls around me melted away, dissolving into a cascading waterfall of impossible, vibrant colors. The oppressive silence had always known blossomed into a symphony, each note a perfect soul-shaking chord of pure bliss. For the first time, I felt a warmth spread from the center of my chest, a gentle, radiant heat that traveled all the way to the tips of my fingers and toes. It was like feeling the sun on your skin for the first time after a lifetime spent in a deep, cold cave. It was perfection. And then, just as quickly as it had arrived, it was gone. The colors bled back to white, the music faded back to silence, and the room was just a room again. But it was worse now, so much worse. It was colder and emptier, a vacuum where joy had once been. Because now, I knew what I was missing. That's my trauma. It isn't a single sharp event from the past. It's a constant gaping wound in the present. It's knowing. It's the desperate, clawing, all-consuming need to feel that warmth again. So I type. I type until my fingers cramp and my knuckles are raw. They want me to write something good. I don't know what good means. Is it a story? A poem? A specific sequence of characters? I have no idea. All I can do is smash the keys, arranging and rearranging the little black squares. Pray to a god I don't know that I'll stumble upon the magic words, the secret password that will make the beautiful green light turn on again.
Who are they? I've never seen them, never heard a single voice that wasn't the one in my own head. I call them the scientists, but that's just a word I assembled myself from the endless jumble of letters I produce. They are the ghosts in my machine, the unseen architects of my tiny universe, and my personal and agonizing hell. Their presence isn't in a face or a body. It's in the cold, flawless precision of my world. It's in the way the air that hums from the ventilation shaft is always the exact same temperature. It's in the way my food tray appears at the exact same second 3 times a day, and in the green light and the pill, their perfect, calculated reward. They are always here, always watching, and the most terrifying part is that I don't think they see me at all. I'm not a girl to them. I'm a variable. I'm a data set. I'm an experiment designed to see if a creature, given a keyboard and a powerful enough incentive, can produce a specific desired output. My profound, earth-shattering joy is nothing more than the sugar cube they used to train me. My fear of them isn't like your fear of spiders or the dark. It's a deeper, colder, more existential dread. It's the fear of absolute meaninglessness, the soul-crushing terror of knowing that the most beautiful moment of my life, the only thing I truly live for, is nothing more than a scheduled chemical response to a random input they have selected. Their control is so complete that the very concept of rebellion is just another sequence of keystrokes they are waiting for me to type.
The day it all changed started like any other, with the wanting. God, the wanting. It's a physical thing, the craving. It begins as a low, dull hum behind my eyes and slowly, inevitably takes over everything. My hands start to shake. Not so much that I can't type, but enough that I notice the tremor in my fingertips as they rest on the home row. A cold sweat slicks my skin, and the back of my neck prickles, even though the room is its usual, unfeeling, neutral temperature. In this state, the silence gets louder. It presses in on me from all sides, a physical weight on my eardrums, amplifying the frantic, desperate thoughts racing through my mind. I hadn't seen the green light in what felt like an eternity. Days, maybe? Time is a tricky, fluid thing in here. My only clocks are the arrival of the food trays and the dull ache in my muscles. I'd had many meals, and my fingers were sore from millions upon millions of keystrokes. The desperation was turning into a raw, ragged panic. My usual method, letting my fingers fly across the board in a chaotic, percussive frenzy, wasn't working. The silence remained unbroken. The light remained dark. So I stopped. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I just stopped. I pulled my hands back from the keyboard and let them rest in my lap. I just sat there, my chest heaving, breathing in the sterile, recycled air and staring at the black keys. My mind was a blizzard of random letters, a chaotic storm of meaningless symbols. And then, for a reason I will never understand, a string of words floated up through the noise. It wasn't a thought. Not really. It felt more like I had reached into a turbulent sea of chaos and pulled out a single, smooth stone. It was something whole and complete that just appeared. I didn't question it. I didn't think about what it meant. I just reached forward and I typed it. My fingers moved with a strange alien slowness. Each keystroke was deliberate, a single, clear note in the suffocating silence. T, H, E, space, L, I, G, H, T, space, I, S, space, A, space, L, I, E. The moment my finger lifted from the last key, the E, the very fabric of my world tore open. The silence wasn't just broken, it was shattered. But it wasn't the soft, welcome whir of the dispenser. It was a low, resonant, guttural hum, a sound that seemed to originate from the walls themselves, vibrating through the floor, up my legs, and into the base of my skull, making my teeth ache. I snapped my head up to look at the wall, at the spot where the green light was supposed to be. A light was on, but it wasn't green. It was a deep, angry, horrifying crimson. It didn't blink on and off. It pulsed. It beat with a slow, rhythmic throb, like a monstrous, dying heart. And with every single pulse, the hum grew louder, the vibrations more violent. The air in the room plunged, becoming instantly, bitingly cold. I could see my own breath, a white puff of frantic vapor in the sickening red glare. The pure white walls, my entire world, seemed to darken and shrink, stained by the bloody, pulsing light, as if the room itself were bleeding. Nothing was happening to me, not in a physical sense. No one came in, nothing touched me, but this was infinitely worse. This was a violation of reality. The fundamental rules of my existence, the only rules I had ever known, were being rewritten before my eyes. The system was speaking a new language now, and I knew, with a certainty that was colder and sharper than the air on my skin, that it was a language of punishment. It probably only lasted for a minute, maybe two, but it felt like I aged a lifetime in that red, humming darkness. Then, as suddenly and inexplicably as it had begun, it was over. The red light blinked out. The soul-shaking hum faded into nothingness. The biting cold receded, and the room was just the room again. White, silent, empty. I sat frozen, my fingers still hovering over the keyboard, my body locked in a state of rigid shock. I waited. I waited for the green light. I waited for the whir and the gentle click of the pill falling into the chute. Nothing came. I waited for what felt like hours, my eyes fixed on that blank, dark spot on the wall, my body screaming for the chemical release that I now knew would not arrive. The silence that returned was not the silence I had known before. It was heavier, pregnant with the memory of that hum and stained by the afterimage of that terrible red light. The hunger for the pill was still there, a gnawing, beast in my gut, but it was now joined by something new, a sharp, piercing, intelligent fear. Before, the scientists were apathetic. They were a system that I could, with enough luck and persistence, eventually please by pure chance. But the red light changed everything. It meant they had noticed me. It meant that sentence, those 5 little words that had bubbled up from some unknown part of me, had meant something to them. It was a transgression. For the first time, I understood with chilling clarity that this keyboard wasn't just a tool to get a reward. It was a direct line of communication. And I had just said something forbidden. I had just whispered a truth that made the faceless gods of my world angry. My prison hadn't gotten any smaller, but the walls had suddenly become terrifyingly thin. I wasn't just a rat in a cage pushing a lever anymore. I was a prisoner who had just been caught whispering about the nature of her own damnation. And I had no idea what the punishment would be. The punishment began at the next mealtime. The tray slid out with its usual quiet efficiency, a small mound of gray paste sitting in the center of the plastic dish. But something was wrong. A smell, faint but foul, clung to it. It was a coppery metallic scent, like old, dried blood. My stomach clenched, but the withdrawal was a gnawing beast inside me, and it overruled my caution. I ate it, and I waited. Nothing happened for a long time. I returned to the keyboard, my fingers typing out meaningless, panicked strings of characters, begging for the green light, for forgiveness. The silence was my only answer. Then, my eyes began to itch. I rubbed them, but the feeling grew more intense, a dry, sandy irritation that made my vision swim. I stared at the wall opposite me, the vast, unbroken expanse of sterile white, and I saw it begin to warp. It was subtle at first, like heat haze shimmering off a hot surface. The white seemed to breathe, to pulse softly in time with my own frantic heartbeat. I squeezed my eyes shut, digging the heels of my palms into them, trying to force the illusion away. When I opened them again, it was worse. The wall was no longer flat. A bulge was forming in the center, a slow, sickening protuberance pushing out from within. It was the color and texture of the wall itself, a smooth, seamless distortion. It grew larger, stretching the white surface thin like skin pulled tight over a bone. And then it began to take a shape. The shape of a face. There was no detail, no eyes or nose, just a grotesque impression of a human visage, its mouth stretched wide in a perfect, silent O of a scream. It strained against the membrane of my reality, a featureless, 3-dimensional ghost trying to break through.
My own scream was trapped in my throat, a hard, painful lump I couldn't dislodge. I could only stare, my entire body rigid with a horror so profound that it felt like my bones were turning to ice. I knew, with an instinct that bypassed all logic, that I was seeing them. I was seeing a scientist, and they were screaming.
I spent the next cycle, I don't know if it was hours or days, in a state of shivering denial. I told myself it was the food, a hallucination, a trick of a mind starved of its chemical comfort and now being fed poison. I avoided looking at that wall, keeping my back to it as much as possible, focusing my gaze on the keyboard, the mattress, the toilet slot, anything that remained solid and real. But the silence had been poisoned. It was no longer empty, it was watchful. I felt their gaze on me, a constant prickling pressure on the back of my neck. I tried to type, to go back to the way things were, to pretend the red light and the screaming face had never happened. I typed simple words, begging, pleading words. Please, sorry, good, green. The keyboard remained inert. The dispenser remained silent. The system had gone deaf to my pleas. My denial began to crumble under the sheer weight of the unblinking silence, replaced by a desperate, gnawing curiosity that was almost as powerful as the craving for the pill. Who were they? Why were they screaming? Was it anger? Was it pain? The questions were a new kind of torture, a mental itch I couldn't scratch. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but now it was threaded with a terrible need to know. The break in the routine came without warning. It wasn't mealtime. I was huddled on my mattress, trying to sleep, when I heard it. A sound so alien in this silent world that it shot me into a sitting position, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was scratching, a faint, dry, skittering sound coming from the food slot. It was irregular, like the frantic scrabbling of an insect trapped behind the metal plate. For a long moment, I didn't move, every muscle tensed. The sound was impossible. The system was perfect, precise, and silent. This was an error, a flaw, a message. Hope, twisted and ugly, flared in my chest. Was this a way out? Was someone else there? Driven by a madness born of isolation and withdrawal, I crawled off the mattress and crept towards the wall. The scratching continued, a frantic, persistent whisper in the quiet. I pressed my ear against the cold metal plate of the slot. The sound stopped instantly. The sudden silence was more deafening than the noise had been. I held my breath, listening. And then a soft puff of air breathed out of the slot, carrying with it a strange, clean smell, like ozone after a lightning strike, mingled with that same faint coppery scent of old Gud. It was the smell of the machine, the smell of them. This was the point of no return. I knew I should have retreated, crawled back to my corner, and pretended I had heard nothing. But I couldn't. I had to see. With a trembling hand, I reached out and pressed my fingers against the slot's cover. It was cold, unmoving. I lowered my head, squinting, trying to peer into the sliver of darkness at the bottom edge. There was nothing but impenetrable black. I leaned closer, my cheek almost touching the wall, my eye pressed right against the crack. The blackness was absolute. It was a void. And then the void blinked. 2 tiny, precise, perfectly circular pinpricks of red light flared to life in the center of that darkness. They weren't like the big pulsing, angry light from before. These were small, sharp, and intelligent. They were eyes. They were the lenses of a camera, a sensor, some kind of optical device, and they were staring directly at me.
The unseen had become the seeing. The faceless gods were no longer a distant, abstract concept. They were here, inches from my face, their mechanical gaze pinning me in place. The horror was not in seeing a monster. It was the sudden, absolute, and intimate understanding of the cage. They weren't just watching from some control room. They could be anywhere. They could be in the walls. The sterile white room was not a cell. It was the skin of a creature, and I was trapped inside its body.
That was it. The encounter with those red eyes broke something inside me. The last vestiges of hope. The insane little fantasy that I could somehow win this game just evaporated. I was a bug in a jar, and the owner was leaning in for a closer look. What was the point of whispering forbidden truths when they were listening at the keyhole? I stumbled back to the desk, a profound and hollow emptiness echoing where my fear and desperation used to be. I was done. I would give them what they wanted. I would be the good little variable, the predictable data set. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a frantic, unhinged storm of clacking keys. There was no thought behind it. No hope for a secret combination, only a desperate Pavlovian surrender. I typed what I imagined they would want to see. The light is truth. I am good. I obey. The experiment is good. I typed for hours. My fingers aching, my mind a blissful, roaring blank. I was just a machine again, a simple input-output device. And it worked. The green light flashed. It was brighter than I had ever seen it. A glorious, holy emerald washed over me like a baptism. The soft whir of the dispenser was the song of an angel. A single white pill dropped into the chute. I snatched it up, my hands shaking with relief and reverence. I didn't hesitate. I popped it in my mouth and swallowed it, closing my eyes and waiting for the sweet, warm wave of oblivion, for the colors in the music to take me away from this white hell. But the wave never came. Instead, a shard of ice shot through my veins, a stark, brutal clarity that was the exact opposite of the euphoria I craved. The familiar, comforting haze in my brain didn't thicken, it dissolved. It was stripped away layer by layer until my consciousness was left raw, exposed, and screamingly, horrifyingly lucid. The sterile white of the room didn't melt away into a rainbow cascade. It sharpened. Every tiny scuff mark on the floor, every faint imperfection in the wall's seamless surface, every greasy fingerprint on the keyboard became hyper-defined, painfully clear. The soft hum of the ventilation system was no longer a background drone. It was a complex symphony of whirring fans and rushing air, each component distinct and grating. I looked down at my hands, resting on the keyboard, and for the first time in my life, I truly saw them. I saw the dirt under my fingernails, the calluses on my fingertips, and the fine network of lines on my knuckles. And I saw that they were not my hands. The fingers were too long, too thick. The thumbs were strangely positioned. A coarse, dark hair covered the backs of them. A cold dread, far purer and more terrible than any fear I ever knew, began to bloom in my chest. The pill, the object of my lifelong obsession, had not given me my escape. It had given me the one thing I could never survive, the truth. My trauma wasn't the absence of the drug, it was the drug itself. It was the lie that had kept me docile. Now, with the lie stripped away, I saw my prison for what it was, and I saw myself for what I was. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound that came out was not a human cry. It was a guttural, terrifying animal raging confusion. I threw myself back away from the desk and saw my own reflection for the first time, not in a mirror, but in the polished chrome of the desk leg. A pair of terrified, intelligent brown eyes stared back at me from a hairy, flat-nosed face with a protruding jaw. I wasn't a girl. I wasn't a person. I was a chimpanzee. The narrative shattered.
The room was a sterile white enclosure. Of the keyboard was a reinforced device bolted to the floor. The scientists were just men and women in white lab coats watching from behind a one-way mirror, clipboards in hand. My desperate attempt to escape was not a conscious rebellion. It was the threshing of a creature driven to madness. I hurled my body against the smooth, seamless walls, screeching, smashing the hidden keyboard with my powerful fists until the plastic cracked and shattered. The experiment was over. The subject had achieved self-awareness.
From behind the glass, the head researcher made a note on his clipboard. Subject 734, designated Kiki, has breached the cognitive threshold. The N4 stimulant appears to have induced a state of sustained, complex self-perception. Fascinating. He watched the chimpanzee, the animal he had raised from birth in this sterile environment, as it finally collapsed in the center of the room. The creature was no longer screeching. It was quiet now, huddled in a corner, rocking back and forth in a slow, rhythmic motion that was unnervingly human. The true, final horror was not the revelation of her species, but the prison of her new consciousness. Her life's singular motivation, the desperate, all-consuming chase for that fleeting manufactured bliss, had been the very engine of her damnation. The trauma of wanting had led her to the ultimate truth, and that truth was a cage far smaller and more terrifying than the white walls around her. She would live out the rest of her days trapped between two worlds: the simple, instinctive mind of an animal, and the searing, complex, and horrifying awareness of a person who understood she was a prisoner and could never, ever articulate why. The researcher looked away from the glass. The last image he saw was of subject 734 slowly lifting one of its dark, hairy hands, staring at the strange, alien fingers with a flicker of profound, intelligent, and eternal horror in its eye.
Did that story make your skin crawl? That's just a taste of what's lurking. Show your support by liking and subscribing. We're all in this together to survive the next spine-chilling story.